Okay, next example. We have our familiar, beloved animals again, and this time we might think about this as something like a chat program that you might have in your game, or some little sub window somewhere in a multiplayer mode where your players can chat with each other. And so let's just quickly go over how this layout is built up. The only thing that we have is some parent element for everything with some background. Then we have a container element for the actual chat, which has this orange margin, as you can see here. So all that we want to achieve with this is to get our content centered a little bit and don't stretch to look a little bit nicer, I think. Okay, but that's not what we're actually interested in. What we are actually interested in is how basically those two elements work together and what sort of pattern they form. And this time, this is basically ready. This is already set up, and we will just check how this happened and what those properties are. Now, the pattern that we are looking at here, and again, this is something that you could also do in different scenarios. This is not only working in this single case where you have that kind of chat program. It would also work vertically. It would also work with several elements. But the idea is that we have one element on one side that is kind of fixed, that we always want to be just as big as the content that it has. In this case, it's the image of the cat. And then we have next to it some other element like this text form here that is stretching over the whole rest of the width. And to reach this pattern, again, we basically look at those two elements, the image element here and the text element next to it. This only has a text label, nothing too fancy, nothing else. And we are only interested in the combinations of bases, shrink and grow. And now to reach this pattern, what we do is for our fixed element that we want to only look at its content size, we set a flex of auto, a shrink of 1, and a grow of 0, which is basically the default setting, given that we have a image of a size that we actually want to have. Now, if you want to resize the image, obviously then you would have to change the size, but the effect or the pattern would still be let this element behave in a way that it only regards the content that it has and only covers that much space as this content needs. In particular, we are setting a grow of 0, so we don't want this element to use any more space. And on the other hand, the other element, we actually want it to stretch. We have something interesting here, and that is actually not an error, but something that you can really use as a pattern, is to set the flex basis to 0%. Because what this does is this totally ignores the content of the element and what's inside in the element. The only thing that this looks at, and that only works in combination with a grow of 1, is only look at your container and use just the size that the container gives you. So the basic thing that I would like you to take away from this example is that we can actually do things that maybe you might initially think that setting a flex basis to 0% might be useless. But with Flexbox, this actually makes sense and has a kind of meaning, only in combination with the grow of 1, because obviously if we would set this to 0, our element shrinks to nothing. But if we set this in combination with a grow, this basically means don't look at your content at all, only consider how much space your container gives you. And again, the image element is doing exactly the opposite thing. It is only looking at the content that it has and is ignoring the space that the container gives it, especially by setting the grow to 0. So this is the kind of pattern that we have. This would always work when you combine those elements. Obviously, you could always use this when you combine more elements. But the most interesting thing, I think, again, to take away here is this 0% basis, and that in combination with its grow property, it can actually make sense.